The cure is in the cause. Isn't that a valuable lesson? The cure is in the cause. I'm telling you, folks, don't you let any problems come in your life, mental, physical, or spiritual, and just treat the symptom. Make sure you get to the cause. What is causing this? What brought this on? And then from that point, you start working towards your cure. And you'd be amazed at how many problems you can solve. I mean, like seriously, in your home, in your schoolwork, in your job or business. I mean, just like every dynamic of life. Remember, the curse never comes without a cause. So search out that cause. Very foundational. Tonight, we are going to get into a heavy hitter. Something that is not even, an epidemic, but it's what we would call today a pandemic. Something that's just really affecting people, not just in America, it's all over the world. And this is none other than addressing diabetes. And what we want to do is we want to unlock the code on it. So we're going to really unlock the code on diabetes and really find out what is causing this problem, because so many people are being stricken with this disease. And I know for sure that God wants to do something about it, and I want to do something about it, and that's why I'm so grateful to be here with you all this evening. Well, speaking of that, since we are getting ready to start, I hope you don't mind true. Understand what we're going to take, but that we understand how to overcome. Come back and we'll continue, okay? So let's take a look.
Type 2 diabetes occurs when your pancreas does not produce enough insulin, and your body is resistant to the insulin known as glucose for energy. Your body takes the food you eat and breaks down fat, protein, and carbohydrates for energy. During the digestion process, the carbohydrates from your food are broken down into glucose. Glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream, where it is carried to cells throughout your body. A healthy pancreas releases a regular supply of insulin into your bloodstream. After you eat, your blood glucose levels rise, and your pancreas responds by releasing more insulin to move the glucose into your cells. Insulin acts as a key, opening up the cell so it can accept the glucose. In a person with type 2 diabetes, your insulin receptors are less sensitive. Though your pancreas continues to produce some insulin, it is not enough to meet your body's needs. When your body's cells are less responsive to insulin, it is more difficult for glucose to enter the cells and raise your blood glucose level. As a person with type 2 diabetes, it is important to monitor and maintain healthy blood glucose levels. Over a long period of time, high blood glucose levels can lead to serious health complications such as heart attack and stroke, blindness, kidney failure, and nerve damage. By getting daily physical activity, eating a healthy diet, and taking your prescribed medication, you will decrease your chances of developing complications from diabetes.
All right. So, again, our goal is not just to battle the complications with diabetes. We want to get rid of the entire disease. Isn't that right? Now, I will let you know that I have seen individuals as fast as 4 weeks reverse their diabetes. As fast as 4 weeks. So it is not only possible that diabetes can be reversed, but it's possible that it can happen quickly. The key is how deep and how much you and I are willing to do a hard word. This word is so difficult. This word is called cooperate. You got to just be willing to cooperate. You got to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to hear some new things. I'm going to learn some new things. But you know what? It's only going to be effective when I actually practice it. You know, it's kind of like having books, and you got real pretty books, and you put it on your shelf, and when people come in your house, they say, wow, look at that library. They have such a pretty library. And then one day you say to them, how many of these books you've read? And the person says, oh, none of them. And it's like, well, so why do you have it in your library? Well, it just makes my library look good. You know, sometimes we just love having access to the knowledge without actually internalizing that knowledge. And so I want you to internalize it. I want you to take it personally, to say, you know what? I'm going to do this. Not just see it, not just hear it, not just know about it. I'm going to do this. You know, there's a little statement in the Bible. It's actually in the book of James. And it talks about, blessed are the doers of the word. And I like that because there's a lot of people who love to hear things, but what's more important is what you're doing with the things you've heard, okay? Now, when we start getting into this whole thing about diabetes, please understand that, you know, there's ways that we can look at it. In understanding diabetes, and like I said, I love the fact that there's books out now that's for the lay people. You know, it's for people like you and I who are not medical professionals per se. Yes, I am a lifestyle educator. I've done this for many years. But at the same time, there's a lot of people in medical practice today that would look even down on a person like myself, quite honestly. Nevertheless, I found myself often giving education in realms where there's lots of doctors, physicians of all sorts. And when I'm teaching, I will ask them, is that right? And they'll say, yep, that's correct. And so they'll know, hey, this guy really knows what he's talking about, okay? Well, how did I get that? I started picking up books and I started studying, okay? I became very interested in this. Cancer runs rampant through my mother's side of the family. My mother died of cancer. My Aunt Norma died of cancer. My Aunt Baricia died of cancer. My Aunt Mary died of cancer. So, I mean, cancer is huge on my mother's side. On my father's side, diabetes and hypertension all day long. I mean, just diabetes, and you go back to grandpa, diabetes, you go back to grandpa's grandpa, diabetes. I mean, it's just profuse. It's all over the place. So at the age of 47, I'm supposed to have any of those diseases right now. And so when I got my blood work done, boy, was I thankful. I am nowhere near close to diabetes, and there's absolutely no indicators showing that there's any cancer flowing in my body, of course, by the ways that it can be tested. And so I'm thankful for that. But again, we learned something last night. Often people will say, well, mom had cancer, so I guess I'm going to get it. Dad had diabetes and hypertension, but I guess I'm going to get it. But we learned something very special last night, didn't we? How many of us were here last night? I think it was a lot of us, right? It was like all of us. Okay, so when we were here last night, we learned something about heredity. Heredity is like something. What did we learn that heredity is like? I'll use my hands to give you a clue. Heredity is like a loaded gun. But what pulls the trigger? Lifestyle pulls the trigger. So from a heredity standpoint, do I have genes that are predispositioned to become cancerous or anything like that? Sure I do. But as long as I do not repeat the lifestyle that mom and dad lived, I do not have to get what they had. And so it is with you. So when we go through all of this, we're going to get some good understanding. When we look at diabetes, let's remember, in our precious little book, I just showed it to you here, again, Health Power, a layperson's book, easy to find. And when in this book, right there on page 52, it helps educate us on diabetes. And here's what it says. When speaking about diabetes, what it is, how does it work, it says, diabetes occurs when the body becomes unable to handle glucose, okay? Unable to handle glucose, better known as sugar, which builds up to dangerous levels in the blood. What you want, if you're measuring your numbers, and you can get a little instrument from CVS, Rite Aid, Walmart, you can get it from tons of places, any place with a pharmacy. You can get something that can actually test your glucose levels. You can actually get that very easily. Now, the thing is that you need to know your numbers. So what happens is this. If your glucose numbers comes back above 126, if it comes back 126 or higher, that is full-blown diabetes. You are diabetic, okay? But if your numbers are between 100 and 125, then that is called pre-diabetic. You're pre-diabetic. But if it is 99 or under, that means no diabetes. Okay? So when you're measuring your glucose levels, like I said, if you were to go ahead and get one of these apparatuses from any of these stores, what you can do is just basically go ahead, do the prick, and the blood gets on the strap and everything, and you test it, you stick it in the tube, and if that number comes up 99 or less, kind of shake your hand, and then go ahead and give God thanks, because you are diabetes free. If you see anywhere from 100 to 125, that's when you don't shake your hand, but you definitely fold them. And you're going to start being prayerful and saying, oh, Lord, help me to be careful because I'm on the road to getting the disease. If you are at 126 or above, again, fold those hands and say, Lord, help me that I can overcome this. And remember some of those things that guy, Dwayne, told us tonight. So watch this, because we're going to talk about kicking diabetes to the curb, because it needs to get kicked, not merely to the curb. It needs to get out of the city, get out of the state, and eventually get out of this planet. So watch this. When we're dealing with diabetes, something's going on that's causing the body to not be able to handle all that glucose that's coming in our system as a result of the foods we eat. So let's talk about that a little bit. When we start to go into this, I want you to kind of pay attention to this point. Again, a diagnosis of diabetes usually made when a blood sugar test is consistently above 125. So that kind of goes over what we've already discussed. And by the way, you need to do this fasting. That's a very important point. Fasting, so FBS, fasting blood sugar. So this is why typically the best time to test your glucose levels is in the morning, which more than likely should be about 8 hours after you've had a meal, okay? It's assumptive. I know a lot of us probably eat late. We'll talk about that. But nevertheless, it should be after a fast. And a fast is typically going to be about 8 hours. That has gone by, no food. Then you test your glucose levels. And then you're going to watch for those numbers. Okay, let's continue. Well, who has it? At the end of the day, here are the facts. And these facts, it's not that I want to alarm you, but I think we need to really pay attention to this, okay? Who really has this disease anyhow? 155,000 to 160,000 Americans die each year from diabetes and its complications. My father, unfortunately, was included in that number. Well, African, Hispanic, and Native Americans have the highest rate of diabetes, okay? African, Hispanic, and Native Americans. Nearly 6 million Americans are potentially, what's that word? That is concerning. I mean, 6 million or more. And by the way, I need to update this. This is actually a little bit old. This is a few years old. The statistics are much higher. Like I told you, it's not just epidemic, it's become pandemic. So this is really, really a major, major issue. All right? So again, there are many individuals that are undiagnosed because I'm noticing a lot of people don't take care of themselves. Not even like, practicing good health practices, but a lot of us don't check ourselves. Okay? I'm telling you right now, I am an advocate for checking yourself. I think you need to pay attention to your body, number one. Number two, when something starts going wrong in your body, I want you to remember this little detailed lineup I'm about to give you here. The first thing that usually happens is you're going to go through something called irritation. Something is going to happen in your body that you're not going to like. So the first sign is usually going to be some type of irritation. Typically, if you don't address that irritation, it's going to progress into something called inflammation. And then you're going to have inflammatory responses in the body. After you have those inflammatory responses in your body, then you can progress to the third stage, which is called ulceration, which means that something's going to literally tear, rip, break, split. Something's going to go wrong inside of the system. And then if we're still ignoring it, then you have full-blown disease. So that's a literal step. Irritation, inflammation, ulceration, disease. What I would like to recommend to us is as soon as you experience the irritation, jump on it right away. A lot of times we go through stuff and we ignore it. We say, I don't know why I've always had this back pain. It just suddenly came out of nowhere. And we just kind of go day by day. Yeah, it's just a back pain. And you notice that back pain is not going away. It's very abnormal. And the next thing you know, we say, yeah, this is like day 5. This is week number 2, and I still have this back pain. The irritation started it, but now you're at probably a state of inflammation. And if you keep ignoring it, that's how sometimes you end up going to the doctor a month or 2 after, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you, you have, and you go ahead and talk about whatever that disease is. And there's a whole lot of diseases. And sometimes you could have caught it early. Now, tomorrow when we talk about cancer, I'm really going to talk about the beware. A lot of cancers give symptoms, thank God. But there's some cancers that give symptoms, but they do it too late. By the time the symptoms show up, you're already at what's called stage 4, which means it's moved from the original location and now it's getting into other organs of the body. And that is when you're literally in a fight for your life. The key cancers that are asymptomatic, no symptoms, are, simply put, abdominal. When you think of abdominal, think pancreas, think liver, think gallbladder, think kidneys, think spleen, think aorta. All of that is making up, think stomach, okay? Think intestine. All of that makes up abdominal cancers. So we'll get into that tomorrow, but the point is that even with diabetes, people are undiagnosed not because there's no symptoms, but because a lot of us don't take charge of our health. We ignore the symptoms. We start getting blurry vision and we say, that was weird. And we just kind of move on, not saying, why did that just happen? And you got to get back to the cause, okay? So I really take this part of the statistic very seriously when it talks about millions and millions of people literally have diabetes and it's undiagnosed, not because there aren't symptoms, but it's because we're way too lax in how we take care of our bodies. So don't treat irritations like normal. When you got something that's irritating you and it's coming out of nowhere and you're like, what is this? Where did this come from? Immediately start looking it up. Start considering some things to say, how can I address this in its early stage? For even cancer can be defeated when it's found in the early stages. And how much the more diabetes? Let's continue with the stats. Of that number, 750,000 to 800,000 are African Americans. So literally, of the 6 million that are undiagnosed, 750 to 800,000 are African Americans. This is why every time I get to do work like this in my communities, I am really trying to encourage my people, stop being so negligent with your body. Stop being so negligent. There are people who literally go years without even seeing a doctor. Now, there's a good way that can happen and a bad way. The good way is when you're so incredibly healthy that you have no reason to see a doctor. Well, that's phenomenal, but that's not always the case. What happens is we're just thoroughly neglectful, sometimes very fearful, and we just don't go see doctors, and not even at least everybody, all of you in this room, before this year closes out, if you have not done this already in 2019, you need to do this before 2019 closes. You need to get specific blood work done. I'm going to tell it to you right now. And this type of blood work that I'm going to recommend, you can go ahead and go to your doctor. Your doctor will go ahead, and I'm sure they won't disagree. But here are at least the bare bone 3 tests that you should have done. Number 1, a CBC, complete blood count, okay? Your CBC. That's going to let you know where your white blood cells, how your white blood cells are doing. It's going to let you know how your red blood cells are doing. It's going to let you know how your blood platelets are doing. Okay, CBC. Number 2, metabolic panel. You want to get a metabolic panel test. Commingled with that, you want a lipid profile test. Okay? What that's going to do is it's going to let you know how your kidneys are functioning. It's going to let you know how your liver's functioning. It's going to measure all these various enzymes and so on. And these things really give you a good idea of what's going on in your body. Oh, how could I forget? There are a few bonuses that I think you should take a look at. 3 more. If you haven't gotten this done this year, 3 more tests that I would highly recommend. B12. A lot of us are very low on B12, especially if you are vegetarian or vegan. My B12 should be between 200 and 1100. My B12 is at 850. But there's a reason for that. There's something that I did, and something that I do, and something that I'm going to show you. So I'll show you how you can get your numbers up. Number 2, big one. Boy, science is really getting amazed with this one. And this one even connects with diabetes. Vitamin D3. You got to make sure your vitamin D is up. Vitamin D3 deficiency is unfortunately epidemic, and they are finding connections between low vitamin D3 and pancreatic cancer, low vitamin D3 and all sorts of kidney diseases, low vitamin D3 and diabetes, even hypertension. I mean, literally, when your vitamin D is low, and that's why you keep seeing me talk about sunlight. Like I talked about sunlight last night. I'm going to talk about sunlight again. Sometimes you have to supplement. Sometimes you just have to because your body's just not metabolizing it even when you're getting tons of sunlight. Sometimes you just got to supplement. So vitamin D3, that's another one. Final, CRP. Get a C-reactive protein test. The C-reactive protein test is one of the best common tests you can get to check for inflammation in your bloodstream. If your CRPs are low, then that means you're in really good shape because inflammation is typically a precursor to a lot of the major diseases, neurological, heart, and cancer. Okay? So those are the things that I would recommend. CBC, metabolic panel, lipid profile. Got to get those 3. In addition to that, vitamin D3, vitamin B12, CRP. If you get those and all your numbers come back good, congratulations, you're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. If any of those numbers are off or way off, you need to start paying attention to that, find out why they're off, and get them where they need to be. Okay? Let's continue. When we deal with diabetes, there's 2 types. Okay? There's the type 1 diabetes, which is often called insulin-dependent diabetes. And there's a reason why you see a child's face, because typically that is the type of diabetes you find in children. In fact, they call it juvenile diabetes. Then you have type 2 diabetes. There's a reason for that picture. Okay? Type 2 diabetes. So these are the type of diabetes that you deal with, type 1 and type 2. Very quickly on type 1. When it comes to type 1, there are some things that are called autoimmune diseases. Does anybody know what I mean when I say autoimmune disease? If I say autoimmune, what's the bottom line point of autoimmune? Say again? Your body quits fighting disease? Not exactly. Not exactly. Very good. It is what we would call in the military friendly fire. Your body is literally attacking itself. Your body is mistaking certain things in the body, even down to the cellular level, and is thinking it's the enemy when it's actually the friend. So there are many autoimmune diseases. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease, okay? Lyme disease, that's autoimmune. Lupus, that's autoimmune. Type 1 diabetes, autoimmune, okay? So they're all in that category where the body is mistaking other organs or cells or what have you as the enemy, and therefore the body is literally attacking itself, and it causes inflammatory responses, and hence we go through a lot of problems. So when you're looking at type 1 diabetes, this is basically the facts here. It afflicts about 5% of diabetics. That's why you don't hear a lot of lectures on type 1, because it's the great, great, great minority. So it says, this type of diabetes usually begins in childhood and is commonly known as juvenile diabetes. These type of diabetics cannot survive without insulin. Therefore, they are called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. And in other words, their pancreas is not even producing the insulin. So that's why in type 1, you got to have those injections where you're shooting the insulin inside your body so that the cells can absorb the glucose and you can live well. But in type 2, it's different. Type 2 is a very amazing kind of thing which affects 95% of diabetics. That's why all of the studies are largely going in the direction of type 2. If you do know somebody who is battling with type 1 diabetes, you can see me after the meeting. There is a place that I can recommend. They can talk to some medical practitioners who are very good in dealing with type 1 and helping sometimes to even have it reversed. So see me afterwards if you know anybody who's battling with that. But in type 2, basically what's happening is it's called adult onset diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This type affects over 90% of diabetics. Now watch. It's called adult onset diabetes, or most type 2 diabetics have plenty of insulin in their bodies when diagnosed, but something's blocking the insulin from getting into the cell. And that's kind of like the mystery. Is there something? That's why if you notice that video where it showed the insulin kind of like saying, hey, open up, but the cell's not listening. The cell is not responding well. So there's something happening with the body. The pancreas is producing all the insulin needed, but the cells are not responding very well. I would like to recommend that when you see these signs, please don't see one and then say, oh, I got diabetes. Let there be at least 2 or 3 witnesses. In other words, if you find you have 2 or 3 of the things that I put up on the screen, then yes, you may need to go ahead and get yourself checked because maybe diabetes is in the picture. But if you find yourself just with one of them, don't just immediately jump to that, especially if you're prone to being anxious, because that's not what we want for you, okay? Let's continue. So, frequent urination. Okay, somebody says, I go to the bathroom all the time. I must have diabetes. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. It just means that it could be. So this is a frequent sign. It's frequent urination, even when you're not even drinking a lot of water. But for some reason, you find yourself just going. You're always having to feel, or you're always having to urinate. Also, weight loss, especially when you're not even trying to lose weight. That's also a sign that it could be diabetes. Excessive thirst, even in the wintertime. You know, I understand if it's a hot summer day, but even in the winter months when it's cold and when people hardly drink water or what have you, but you find yourself not only thirsty, but excessively thirsty. I mean, you're always, I remember my dad, I used to look at him when he would just drink jugs and jugs of water. And I was just like, Dad, why do you drink so much water? He says, oh, I just like drinking water. But it was actually one of the complications or the symptoms of his diabetic condition. And lack of energy. Lack of energy. If you find that I am just constantly low on energy, even if you have a meal and the meal is sufficient and has all sorts of good food in there, the problem is the glucose, which is your energy source, is not being properly assimilated in the cell. So even though you ate a great meal that it should just have you bubbling over with energy, the problem is your cells are not absorbing it well. So you find yourself constantly feeling drained. If you see 2 or 3 of these symptoms in your life, you might be counted amongst one of those undiagnosed, and I would recommend get yourself at least checked out so you can make sure, okay? Let's continue. First step in diabetes. What do you think should be the first step if an individual discovers that they are diabetic? Class. Ascertain the cause. Very good. Always remember that. The first step whenever you're dealing with disease is you need to ascertain the cause. What caused this? I am not suggesting, let me make sure I'm clear on this. If your blood pressure spikes or if your glucose level spikes, you're getting headaches, you're getting dizzy, that's not the time for me to sit you down and say, okay, let's talk about what you're eating. You know, that's not the time for a consultation. You need to get those levels regulated quickly, okay? So there's no question that you need to address the symptom when it's really bad. But what a lot of people do is they keep their treatment just to the symptom. And they never dig deeper to say, what caused this? So that's all I'm recommending when I say ascertain the cause. Get to the cause. If you have a spike and your symptoms are showing danger, address the symptom. Please address it. Just don't limit it to that. Don't get the symptom controlled and then say, whew, all right, back to life. It's like, no, not back to life yet. You need to find out why that happened. And you need to make sure that never happens again. Okay? That's the balance of understanding the cause. Where do we get this concept from? The very first medical book in the market. What's that medical book called? It's called the Bible. The Bible says the curse causeless shall not come. A curse never comes without a cause. As a result of this fact, what did the Bible then tell us to do? It said, hey, then the cause which you don't know, search it out. Well, that makes all the sense in the world. Search out the cause. What caused this? And the sooner you find out what causes it, the better off you will be. So that's going to be our first step. So now, what then would be the cause of type 2 diabetes? So, when you think of the cause of type 2 diabetes, what usually comes to mind? sugar, 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 right? So I was doing my studies here in this wonderful little book, Health Power. And there's a powerful story in this book that I just could not ignore. I remember my dad, when I used to eat fruit, I would say, Dad, you want some fruit? And Dad would say, no, I can't have any fruit. And I would say, why? And he said, sugar. And I was like, that's weird. But I was like, okay, because I always thought fruit's natural. It's supposed to be good. But anyhow, I said, no problem. So later on in life, Dad ended up at the hospital. I mean, all sorts of complications from his diabetes. And I remember that I was there, and the nurse served my dad some food. But watch this. I paused from that story, and now I'm going to give you the facts. Dr. Kevin Anderson in the University of Kentucky did a test. And what he did was this. He decided to go ahead and feed. He got a group of lean, healthy young men. They were lean, and they were healthy, and they were young. And what he decided to do was he fed them a high-fat diet. And they ate that every day, 95% high fat. In 2 weeks, every single one of them turned into mild diabetics. High-fat diet. So what they ended up doing was they got another group of lean, healthy young men. And they fed them a low-fat diet. And they fed them 1 pound of sugar per day for 11 weeks. Not 11 days. 11 weeks. Guess how many diabetics it produced? 0. Healthy, lean young men. High-fat diet. Every single one of them diabetics within just 2 weeks. Healthy young men. Low-fat diet. 1 pound of sugar per day for 11 weeks. Not even one became a diabetic. So the reality is when you think about diabetes, we really need to not so much give our attention to sugar, but give our attention to fat. You got that? Now back to the story. So the nurse comes in the room. So Dad asked me to get him a diet lemonade, like one of those low sugar lemonades. That stuff tastes so nasty. But nevertheless, Dad asked for it, so I was like, all right, no problem. So he was like, get me a diet lemonade. I was like, Dad, I can't get you that. You know the doctors are going to be mad. Boy, just get it to me. I was like, yes, sir. So I went and I got him his his diet lemonade. So I got him his diet lemonade, and I'm like, all right, Dad, here you go. So he opens it up, sticks a straw in there. He's just loving his diet lemonade. So the nurse comes in. Mr. Lemon, they was in the South, Mr. Lemon, you're not supposed to eat like that. She's really getting on Dad, right? She's like, you need to give me that thing. And she took it out of his hand, and Dad is just like, all right. She says, now let me get your food. So she gets his food, white rice and sausage. And I remember I saw that plate, and I thought to myself, now, ain't this something? I said, no. I said, nurse, can I talk to you outside? I whispered. I said, can I talk to you outside? Yes, okay, let's go outside. I said, listen, did you just get on my dad about that diet lemonade? Yes, I did. I said, but you boldly gave him that big, nasty, fat piece of sausage. And then I began to educate her, because again, like I told you last night about doctors, same thing goes for nurses. They can go through 4 to 6 years of education, but they literally do not study nutrition. So next thing you know, she's just like, I never knew that. I said, yeah. I said, can you please get that sausage out of here? And she was just like, absolutely, Mr. Lemon. I was like, thank you very much. And I said, and when you bring it back, I said, just bring back some vegetables and get rid of the white rice. I said, give him brown rice. She was like, no problem. The point is very simple. What really are the causes for diabetes? The causes are actually twofold. Number one, it can occur if any process results in the destruction or malfunction of insulin in the cells in the rest of the body. These include Inherited acquired mutations. Now remember, that's dealing with heredity, right? But remember, heredity is just a loaded gun. It's the lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So what are the real key issues with diabetes? It's not so much heredity, but it's basically fat in the diet, fat on the body. Those are your key culprits. If you really want to get rid of diabetes, you got to get rid of the fat in the diet, and you got to get rid of the fat on the body. Now, there is something amazing that is happening in the medical world. I want you to go home tonight and I want you to Google this. It's called TOFI, T-O-F-I. TOFI is absolutely amazing. Kind of scary, but nevertheless amazing. TOFI stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside. TOFI, T-O-F-I. There are some people that are very slim, but they're diabetics. And you're kind of like, okay, so what's up with that? And often it is the case that they are going through what's called TOFI. They're thin looking on the outside, but there's fat buildup and fat deposits developing on the inside. And again, largely because of the diet. So you can be thin on the outside and have what's called a fat buildup on the inside. And this also can connect to, again, this thing of the inflammation buildup inside of the system. Fat that builds up in your arteries, kind of like with hypertension, right? You know, when you got some of the fat and the cholesterol and all that stuff building up, but you're thin. Thin on the outside, but fat on the inside. Yes, sir?
Inside fat, are you talking about visceral fat?
Yes, like that's exactly what I'm referring to, visceral fat, okay? Visceral fat can be in the body even though you have a fairly slim physique. So this is something that you really want to be careful with, okay? So the big culprit in diabetes is fat. That's your culprit. So the more that you eliminate fat from the diet and get that fat off the body and get your body to a good place of what's called homeostasis, where your body has a proper way in which it functions, and you know that you're not having a lot of inflammation and things building up on the inside, this is how we can prevent and eventually overcome diabetes. Let's continue. You know, often when we think of malnutrition, we used to think of things like this, right? You know, if any of you used to stay up late at night and watch TV and those little infomercials come on, then you would see some old-time celebrity that's no longer a celebrity, and now they're going around helping unfortunate people, unfortunate children all over the world. And they would go ahead and start to do different things. Very kind deed. I have nothing against that. But what people need to understand is that while this is an image of malnutrition, what we need to understand is this too is an image of malnutrition. That's actually an image, because a lot of times we think because the person's body is so big that, boy, they must eat a lot. Yes, they're eating a lot, but it's not necessarily nutritious food. It's not the things that feed the cells of the body and keeps keeps what we call good cellular integrity. And so when you eat food, you want to think, and I always like to encourage people to do this when you eat food. When you eat food, think eating on a cellular level. Eat food that you know is not just going to satisfy your gut, but it's going to minister to your cells. It's going to give your cells the minerals and the vitamins that it needs so it can function well. I promise you, if you start thinking, let me not just eat to satisfy my belly, let me eat that is going to put nutrients in my system that will minister to my body on a cellular level. When you start eating like that, you're going to find that you can kick a lot of these diseases to the curb. Cancer, diabetes, neurological disorders, and the list goes on. So the real key issue is that we need to understand this is not nutritious at all. This is another image of malnourishment. And a lot of times people don't think that way. We say they're healthy. Do you know that some people actually use the word healthy for a big person? They'll say they're healthy sized or what have you, because they, again, we say healthy and obese. But if you go to any of the medical books, obesity is literally a disease. It's a literal disease. So even when somebody is obese and they may not have this, this, or this, you still have a disease. And you're cutting your lifespan short by at a certain point, every pound, every additional pound can slash off 5 years from your potential lifespan. So this is why you need to be at what's called your ideal weight. At 5'10", 47, at 5'10", 47 years old, my ideal weight is going to be between 155 and 175. I'm right at 168. So what does that mean? That means that my body is in the ideal position to have optimum health. That's the way you want to look at it with your body. You want to be able to find out what is it that is the best weight for my height, for my age, for women if you've had babies, bone density. There's many ways you can test it. But the bottom line is you need to know what your ideal weight should be, and you should strive to hit it. And there's many ways you can do it, okay? Now watch this. When we start to deal with some of the things that contributes to diabetes, again, what I did was I like this because I go to the food first. Food is always going to be first. Food is your number one medicine. Even though exercise is great, getting good sleep is incredibly important, and the list goes on. But food is king. It's the thing you do every day, and it's the key means of how you get a lot of nutrients in your system that keeps your body healthy. So what I did was I started to look again. On page 288 of the Encyclopedia of Foods book, it actually goes through diabetes. And again, if it has an arrow pointing down, it's letting you know these are the foods you don't eat. But I like this. The arrow pointing up, there's a ton of food you can eat. So by no means are we giving a starvation plan, all right? This is nowhere near that. But at the end of the day, what is it that the doctors discovered and said, hey, this stuff is contributing to diabetes? Watch this. Fried foods. If you're a diabetic, you need to stay away from fried food because it introduces an overwhelming amount of fat in the body, okay? You need to move away. And when you're diabetic especially, even if you're frying okra or if you're frying tofu or anything else, no fried food. Even fried plantain, no fried food. If you're diabetic, no fried. Continuing, white rice. This is what you call a simple sugar. It breaks down very fast in the system, and it causes a spike in your glucose levels. So white rice, out. White pasta, out. White pasta. White bread, out. I remember I was at a black church, and we started putting all these things here. And when we were there, white rice, white bread, white this, white that, white, and I had to give this to them because, some people there are acting kind of strange. So I just started to tell them, I said, listen, love white people, hate white food. And so that just brought all the balance in right there. Just love white people, hate white food. So we're dealing with white food. The white foods, a lot of times, are no good. They really aren't because they're simple sugars. Remember last night we talked about the whole grain? You remember that? And the whole grain, when you look at white rice as an example, if you remember when we studied the whole grain last night, there were 3 components to a whole grain. Anybody remember what those 3 components were? Bran, germ, endosperm. Very good. Boy, you guys are great. Now watch this. Do you know what white rice is? It's the removal of the bran and the germ, and it's just the endosperm. And that's why that's why those who eat a lot of white products, white rice, white bread, white pastas, a lot of white foods, when you do that, you'll find more than likely, I can almost guarantee you, anyone who is eating a lot of white rice, white bread, white pastas, and the list goes on, are more than likely suffering from constipation. Because your fiber is killed. You have no fiber. Your fiber is what's compromised. So what's going to happen is a lot of that sticks in your gut. And that's why you notice your bowel movements. Like I actually do a little teaching on healthy bowel movements. What's a healthy bowel movement? It should look like the shape of a banana, which is pretty much like the shape of your colon, the end part of your large intestine. It should come out pretty much shaped like that large intestine. So it's going to come out kind of banana shaped. Because of the bile that comes from, the liver and the gallbladder, that bile is going to give it its color. So it's typically going to be like a brown color. And you're going to find that it's not going to come out broken up in pieces, all these things. It's going to come out literally solid and connected. And you'll find that that's indicative of a good, healthy bowel movement. And you should have that equivalent to your meals. So if you're having 2 meals a day, you should have 2 bowel movements. If you're having 3 meals a day, you should have 3 bowel movements. If you're having 4 meals a day, you're having too many meals. Because I guarantee you're not going to have 4 bowel movements. And what you'll find is that a lot of us need to do some simple math. If you have 5 meals a day, but you're having only 2 bowel movements a day, just do the math. 2 times 7 is 14. Is that right? But how many meals are you having a day? 5. So 5 times 7 is 35. So where's the rest of those meals? You understand that? In the gut. And that's why you remember the good old story about Elvis Presley. You remember that story about Elvis Presley? When he died and they did an autopsy on his body, they found over 40 pounds of backed up fecal matter in his colon. And death begins in the colon. You got to keep your colon clean. And so a lot of times when you eat a lot of this fried and white food, it's backing you up. It's like bad plumbing. It's just backing you up. And so that's another reason why I always encourage people eat whole grains. Whole grains gives you the fiber that's like a broom. It brushes against the walls of those colon and gets all that gook out there. And when you go to the bathroom and you see that stuff out, you might be disgusted, but you can say, thank God it's in the toilet and not in my gut. Make sense? Oh, yeah. So again, white foods, a lot of these white foods, they're stripped grains. Not good, especially for diabetics because it shoots that glucose up. And that's going to create massive complications as it relates to having this disease. Smoking is an absolute no-no. If you know anyone who smokes, I would like for you to tell them about this recipe. This is what we call our stop smoking urge recipe. If anybody has an urge to smoke, this is a wonderful recipe you can give them. I've given this to several smokers, and they can quit. I mean, they don't have to do all the patches and all these other things. You help them get cleansed out, but you also just remember, you mix this together and you have them take it every time the urge kicks in to smoke. You just have them take it, swish it in the mouth for a little while, and it just kills that urge right there. And then that way they're able to control themselves and go through a nice little detox, all right? So again, smoking is an absolute no-no. It not only contributes to lung cancer, but it does contribute, unfortunately, to diabetes because it debilitates normal, proper cell function, okay? So that's the reason why we don't want to do that as it relates to diabetes. Now, when we talk about food, as you saw, there's an arrow, there was tons of foods that we can eat. So while there's some things we need to watch out for when we're dealing with diabetes, there are some things we can eat. What can we eat? Number one, whole grains. Whole grains allows glucose to flow at a much slower level, and it allows glucose not to move so quickly and freely throughout the body, and hence it enables the body, the cells, to properly absorb the glucose much better. Whole grains. If you're getting a pasta even, whole grain. No more regular pastas. You got to see it on the box. Whole grain. You got to make sure if you get a cereal, whole grain, whole wheat, or whatever it may be. If you're going to make bread or buy bread, whole grain. Just keep looking for that, okay? If it doesn't say it, then don't buy it. In addition to that, fruit, fruit, fruit. Do you know mangoes and bananas are especially well tolerated by diabetics? I mean, like, boy, I wish I could have shown my dad these teachings. I didn't know this before he passed away. But it's like, I wish I could have shown my dad, you could have eaten lots of fruit. It is perfectly okay for diabetics to eat fruit. What you typically just want to watch out for is if you're going to give them the banana, just give it to them before it gets real brown and spotty. Try to make sure don't do it when it's green, but try to do it when it's a nice solid yellow. When it's a good solid yellow, maybe 1 or 2 brown spots, that's the best time for the diabetics to eat the bananas. Mangoes, great. Berries, wonderful. I cannot stress berries. If you are diabetic, you want to eat berries because your berries, and when I say berries, strawberry, blackberry, blueberry, raspberry, berries, they are really wonderful in helping your body on a cellular level to maintain its integrity. Okay? Wonderful antioxidants, and the list goes on. So berries, berries, berries. Yes?
How many servings of fruit a day?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Now, we are going to cover it on Sunday for the cooking class as well, but typically you want to get yourself about 4 servings of fruit per day as an adult. 4 servings of fruit per day. Now, if you have an apple, and I actually have some of these as a model I normally use in a class. If you have an apple and you can rest it on your palm, and you can close your palm like this and the apple fills in like the middle portion of your hand, that's called a large apple. That's equivalent to 2 servings. If you have a banana and you can hold, like I've been to the Philippines. Anybody been to the Philippines before, what have you? If you've been to the Philippines or many other, like especially Asian countries, you will find that they have these really tiny bananas, okay? I'm not referring to those. I'm talking about the bananas that we're used to seeing here in America, where they're fairly long. You can kind of hold it in the middle with 2 hands and you still got banana coming out on each side. That is equivalent to a large banana. That's 2 servings. So in other words, if you had a large apple and a large banana, and then you had like just a little bit above a handful of blueberries or raspberries, you just had 5 servings of fruit. Get that? Large apple, large banana, a little above a handful of berries. That's right there. You're at 5 servings of fruit. So when you hear, 4 servings, don't get intimidated. Don't say, oh man, I'm not going to eat anything else. I'm going to become a fruitarian. No, you're not. You're going to just get a sufficient amount of fruit, and it's going to do fantabulous for your body. I made that word up. I know that's not a real word. But nevertheless, you're going to feel great. Yes, my friend Dave.
The question I have regarding that is, when I eat that much fruit, it is so sour, and to me, well, we argue about good carbs, bad carbs,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't eat fruit.
Okay.
My sugar, and she can eat all the fruit, and I don't like it because I wish I could eat it.
Okay.
I can't eat it. Now, but how do you differentiate, and we talk about this all the time, how do you differentiate a good carb versus a bad carb regarding fruit? Whether it's a banana, and I eat a banana because of the potassium, not because of the protein,
Right.
because of the potassium.
Sure.
But regarding fruits like berries, yesterday I had a peach, and it was like, when I bit into it, I cringed.
Yeah.
Bad sugar,
Yeah.
is this going to spike?
Well, I'm not really sure from a factual standpoint, because sometimes you could feel something in you, but it's not necessarily the case, okay? Yeah. Sometimes you feel it, but it's not necessarily the case. So, the best way to know if the fruit is shooting your glucose up is to actually test yourself, okay? Well, here's some ways you can do it. So number one, that same little apparatus I talked about that you can get to test your glucose, you can do that right after a meal. What's going to happen? Well, here's what happens. There's a reference range that laboratory references give for a post-meal testing versus a fast testing. So what you need to do is you need to understand post-meal testing. So you already know your glucose numbers are going to be high because your glucose always goes higher after a meal. But it should not go past a certain level, okay? So if you eat some berries, some peaches, and banana, and the list goes on, and normally your glucose should be under a 99, but let's say it's only at 114. Let's say it's only at 120. That actually means you're totally fine. But if it's shooting up into 180, 200, or above, that's when you can know and say, this was not good for me to eat. So that's the way I would do it. I would say just do it through an actual test like the thing you do at home. Now, let's just get into taste for a second. You can eat berries that are very sour. That just means it came from a bad farm situation. That's all it means. It means that, like some of us, can I give you a recommendation of the best way to eat food? Watch these 2 words. This is going to help you a lot. The best way to eat foods, 2 words, in season. Stop eating foods out of season. When you eat foods out of season, that's when it starts tasting weird in your mouth because it's not supposed to be grown and it's not supposed to be eaten at that time of the year. Food literally grows by seasons. That's why you have winter crops, fall crops, you have spring crops, you have summer crops. So we have all these different crops. So that's why it's been given to us. So eat food in season and you'll find that typically the taste will be a lot better. So sometimes it might be maybe the soil was not treated the best. When my family and I bought some land out in Georgia and we were growing our own fruits, we grew apples, pears, peaches, plums, acerola cherries, persimmons. We were growing all that stuff. And, I remember when we grew our own peaches, and we lived in the peach state, Georgia. And when I grew my own peaches, I had a refractometer, this little instrument that tests the sugar levels in your fruit. And I looked at the peach from the grocery store. It came in at an 8. I looked at the peaches from my backyard. It came in at a 16. We doubled the nutrition because we were very intentional about what we put in our soil. When I bought persimmons from California, I love persimmons, one of my favorite fruits. Hint, hint, I love persimmons, one of my favorite fruits. Did I tell you I love persimmons and that's one of my favorites? Okay, just checking. All right, so when I got some persimmons from California, I ate it and then I tested that on my refractometer. It came in at a 20. That meant it was good. We got a persimmon from my backyard. I had my son look at it. He said, Dad, I don't know how to read this. And I said, well, let me get it. I looked at it. Our persimmons broke the chart. The last number is 30. The blue line went above 30. That meant that every bite of my persimmons gave me every bit of nutrition that God put into a persimmon. You understand that? So there's a thing about growing intelligently. And one of the things is eat in season. So maybe sometimes the fruits you're eating are just probably out of season. Maybe it didn't grow out of the best soil, but you'll find some. Like, if you look for some other peaches, you'll eat that one and say, whoa, this one is really good. And just because it's sweet does not mean that it's raising your glucose levels. It just means that your taste buds are saying, hooray! Your taste buds are just saying, we love this, give us more. So that's all that's happening. But I want to encourage you to eat more fruit. You can eat fruit. The key fruits you may want to watch out for are dried. Dried fruits usually have a really, really, really high sugar content. So figs, raisins, prunes, those type of fruits, if they're dry, any dried fruit has a higher sugar content. So those things as a diabetic, I would say, hey, watch out for that. But when it comes to just your nice raw fruits like your watermelon, your apples, your oranges, your grapes, all sorts of berries, pomegranates, mangoes, man, enjoy yourself. Go ahead and have yourself the servings you need, and it'll work out just fine. How about nuts? Nuts are really, really good for diabetes. Nuts are wonderful, especially because of the various the acids or the oils that are in them, the natural oils that come through it. When you think of your omega-3s and these type of things, you definitely want to get yourself some nuts. Some of your super nuts are going to be your almonds. Almonds are a super nut. Walnuts, phenomenal. Your body likes diversity, so don't be afraid sometimes to do pecan today. You can do walnut tomorrow. There are some nuts that I would recommend we do almost every day, and this goes back to the hypertensive group too. I would highly recommend that you have at least 2 Brazil nuts per day. Try to get about 2 Brazil nuts per day because garlic and Brazil nuts are some of the best ways to get what's called selenium into your diet. And you only need 2 Brazil nuts to get all the daily needs for selenium. So you really want to make sure that you get these things in because these are super nutrients that is good for cardiovascular function, neurological function. So again, nuts, nuts, nuts. Don't do too much. Nuts have a fat component to it. So the typical rule is handful of nuts. Handful of nuts, okay? Try to get them raw. Don't always do roasted. That's that extra oil you don't need. Because remember, we're avoiding fats in the body, okay? So sometimes those roasted oils, they can sometimes contribute some problems. So try to eat your nuts raw, wash them well, and then enjoy them, okay? Wash them. Some people even soak their nuts overnight sometimes. Just the amount you're going to have for the next day. So if you know you're going to have like 10 almonds, you literally will just go ahead and sit it in a little bit of water and let it soak overnight, and then the following morning you can go ahead and take them out and enjoy them. It's a lot easier for the enzymes to break them down, okay? But nuts are extremely important. Beans, beans, beans. Here we go with the beans again. What are we going to do with the beans to make sure that we are not gas machines? Soak them the night before. Very good. But beans, so get them dried. Please don't do canned because, again, they load them up with sodium. Try to get them dry, and then you go ahead, soak them overnight, and then enjoy them the following day, okay? Finally, you got to get yourself some vegetables. Your green vegetables, I would like to recommend to all of you, get as much green in as possible. Your green vegetables are king when it comes to minerals. You want minerals to help protect your body from nasty bugs. There are 4 things that generally suppresses the immune system: parasites, fungus, bacteria, and viruses. Minerals in your body fight against parasites, fungus, bacteria, and viruses. So you want high-level minerals. For me, I mean, I wish I could show you the salad my lovely bride made for me today. I mean, man, that thing just made you click your heels, you know? It was delicious. But in addition to that, earlier in the day, I take 1 scoop of wheatgrass per day, mixed in a little drink that I drink down. I load my body up with green because your green food is just oxygen, cellular integrity, minerals, minerals, minerals that keeps your body and your brain very strong, okay? So this energy that you're seeing coming out of me night after night, that is not by accident. I'm very intentional. So I often like to do a wheatgrass powder. If you can juice the wheatgrass personally, that's great. As a traveler, the powder works a lot better. And then you eat green, green, green. You eat a lot of greens. And when I'm talking about green leaf lettuce, spinach, chard, cucumber, green. Get it in, okay? Very good for the body, all right? You had your hand up, sister. Okay, awesome. So this is what is the diet that I'm recommending for those who are diabetic. Yes, and then yes.
That wheat bread up top, whole grain, is meat a whole grain? I'm all mixed up about bread and just...
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a few things you got to watch out for with bread. Number one, if it just says wheat or if it says enriched wheat, that means it's been a stripped grain. That means that 24 vitamins and minerals in a whole grain. If it says enriched wheat, what they did was they took out the minerals and vitamins and then just put back like 4 or 5. And then they call it enriched. It's actually deception. It should be illegal. Seriously, because the average, when I used to eat enriched wheat, I thought I was getting super wheat. I was like, oh man, it's enriched. Oh man, this has got extra, nutrients. It's an absolute deception. Enriched wheat means they stripped the grain and took a few minerals and put it back into the grain. So you don't want to do that. Get whole grain. So that's number one. Number two, unfortunately, there's a lot of manipulation going on with wheat and other foods. I highly recommend, family, non-GMO. We're going to talk about that more on Sunday, but I cannot stress it. It is now factual that you want to do as much non-GMO foods as possible. So you want to watch out even for your grains. That's why nowadays I like to get cereals or something, and it's called ancient grains. This morning I had pancakes. And when I had pancakes, it was made with ancient grain flour. Okay? So that way you're getting like the grain of the grains. You're getting it in its most original state. But nevertheless, for now, I just say at least do whole grain. If you just can at least do that, then you're good. Okay? We'll talk more about the other stuff on Sunday. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine or your medicine, and let your medicine be your food. But I feel like we give Hippocrates too much credit. Because before there was Hippocrates, there was God. And God said the same thing in the Bible. The Bible says in Psalms 104 and verse 14, it says, he causes the grass to grow for the cattle and the herb for the what? For the service of man. So when God allowed the herbs to come out of the field, out of the ground, he did that so that those herbs might serve man. And it says that he may bring forth food out of the earth. The word service literally means minister. So when God says, I cause those herbs to grow out of the ground that they might minister to man, God knew that when he made the fruits, the grains, the nuts, the vegetables, and the seeds, God knew that this is going to be like medicine to us. And God knew that before Hippocrates did. And so I just like giving credit where credit is due. Hippocrates was a pretty smart guy, but his intelligence pales when it compares to God's. And so God was the one that is the originator of these wonderful thoughts and these wonderful ideas. And boy, if we can lift up Hippocrates, I think we should doubly lift up the Savior and the Creator of heaven and earth. Well, Death by Prescription was written by Ray D. Strand, a powerful point here that he makes about medication, because often we say, can't I just take a pill and just go ahead and deal with my glucose levels that way and eat whatever I want? Well, the problem is that sometimes the medication causes complications. Notice this. Ray D. Strand, MD, states in his book, Death by Prescription, in medical school, I had not received any significant instruction on the subject. He's talking about nutrition. He says, I was not alone. Only approximately 6% of the graduating physicians in the U.S. have any training in nutrition. Medical students may take elective courses on the topic, but few actually do. The education of most physicians is disease-oriented with a heavy emphasis on pharmaceuticals. We learn about drugs and why and when to use them. And so this is the reason why when you go to a doctor, they're not talking often about, well, just simply exercise or take these things, change your diet around and so on. Some doctors are getting a little bit more cognizant about this today, and I'm really thankful for that. And that's why when I showed you that video opening night, and we saw escape fire and how doctors were saying, hey, I want to do more for my patients. There are a lot of doctors out there that are just wonderful people. They know that they're under a system that is not always looking out for yours and my best interest, and they want to change that. So there's some great people out there, including doctors like these that says, look, the answer is not drugs. The answer is lifestyle. And so it is, if we're going to talk about lifestyle, like anything, you got to pay attention to the owner's manual, okay? And when you look at the owner's manual, you cannot help but to look at the owner's manual. The owner's manual lets us know the best diet to eat. You see, I'm going over all of this with you, but it was already in the book of Genesis. A fruit, grain, nut, vegetable diet. Notice, and God said, behold, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat or food. Then, later on, God says, thou shalt eat the herb of the field as well. So by the time you get to Genesis 3, mankind's diet was a whole food, plant-based diet. That's the original diet. And there is no diet that has improved on this diet. To date, I mean, you can look up the best of the science today. Caldwell Esselstyn, T. Cullen Campbell, Dr. John McDougall, Dean Ornish. All they're saying is God was right. That's all. Do you know that sums up their whole lecture? They just get millions while God just kind of gets forgotten. But that's all they're saying is, yep, the Creator was right. Whole food, plant-based diet. So that's basically where this is all coming from. Always remember, family, that when you think about this little statement right here, Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and then it says, and man became a living soul. When that verse says that, that means that you got to remember, many of the elements from the dust are actually found in us. Think about what's in the dust. Magnesium, phosphorus, calcium, potassium, sodium, iron, iodine. That's why we should choose foods that come from a root system. Do you see how that makes sense? That's all the stuff we need today to survive, and you get it through foods that come from a root system. So that's number one. If you really want to go ahead and really combat this thing with diabetes, whole food, plant-based diet. Can't go wrong. But watch this one. The next one, you will see a change in your condition if you do what I'm going to recommend. And you can start this tomorrow. I'm going to find out who's going to start this tomorrow. Exercise, right? Watch this. When we talk about exercise, I want you to pay attention to this. So exercise, bodily exertion. We talked about this last night. Aerobic, anaerobic. You want to make sure that you have some good cardio. Brisk walking is the best. This is brisk walking. Brisk walking is just, this is not brisk walking. Looking at your cell phone and returning text messages and walking. That is not exercise, okay? So I hope we're clear on that. But what is exercise? Brisk walking. It's when your arms, your back is straight, shoulders back, head up, and your arms are moving like this. And you're just walking at a more elevated pace than you normally would walk if you were just returning a text message. So that's what you're doing, is you're just literally walking like this. And if you can do a brisk walk for probably about, let's say, how many minutes did I say yesterday we should strive to do a brisk walk? Man, if you could do a brisk walk for 30 minutes in a given day, do you know you're involving almost every organ of your body and putting it into action when you do a brisk walk? And that's why brisk walking is king. It's one of the best exercises that you can do, okay? So exercise. But watch this one. This one is huge. And I'm about to wrap it up too for you folks. After a meal. This is huge. I want to challenge everybody in this room, whether you have diabetes or not. After a meal is when your glucose level shoots the highest. That's when it shoots the highest. So when you walk after a meal, something very special happens. Watch what happens. Proper walking. So that's your little chart right there. Again, head straight, shoulders back, erect. Arms are swinging when you're walking, okay? That's good walking. Now, with a digestive walk, you're not going at the pace like what we were talking about with the brisk walk. You're not doing that for a digestive walk, okay? A digestion walk is simply more of a stroll. It's just more like this. Nice pace. I think all of us can handle that, right? You can handle that pretty well. That's a digestion walk, okay? Now watch this. 6 benefits of walking after a meal. Let's see, I'll go ahead and magnify that for you. All right, so this is the big one for me right here. Helps in digesting food. The amount of gut problems that people are going through today is really huge. A lot of people are having all sorts of gut issues. Grumbling guts, bloating, a lot of these problems. You can help eliminate a lot of that if you simply just start taking walks after your meal because it assists in digestion, okay? So that's one thing. But it also helps boost your metabolism, which is going to help you to burn calories more. So if you're trying to lose weight, taking a walk after a meal helps boost your metabolism. Another one that I really love is it improves blood circulation. The more that your bodies move is the more that blood circulation takes place in your system. That's seriously important. It actually, ladies and gentlemen, helps lower blood pressure. So for those of us, again, because remember, diabetes and hypertension are like first cousins. I mean, they almost go together. So that's why you want to watch out for that. And then it helps, of course, relieving stress, and it helps in weight loss because, again, it's boosting your metabolism. So here's what they found. How long do you do this? Over the years, researchers have found that a post-meal walk as short as how long? Can you handle that? That's 7.5 minutes one way and 7.5 minutes back. Every meal, if you have 3 meals a day, you're going to get a lot of walking in. But the bottom line is 15 minutes after every meal. 7.5 minutes one way, 7.5 minutes back. That's all we're asking you to do, is take a walk after your meal, okay? And you will find that this works wonders. Why? Guess what happens when you take a walk? Did you know muscles require glucose and receives it from the bloodstream? Isn't that cool? I love that. Remember, what's the issue with diabetes? The issue with diabetes is that the insulin is telling the cell to open, but the cell is not responding well. So glucose begins to rise in the bloodstream. So do you know, and when does glucose rise the highest in the bloodstream? After a meal. So when you walk after a meal, your muscle fibers will now be able to absorb that free-flowing glucose. And that's how you keep your numbers down. Okay? So it's an awesome thing to think about. Yes, Brother Dave.
We've tried this as well. We've experimented with this in the past, that if you eat immediately after a meal,
Walk.
if you walk immediately after a meal, your blood sugars will drop anywhere between 1 and 3 points.
That's right. Very good. Per minute. Notice that. 1 to 3 points per minute. So this is why I cannot encourage this enough. If any of you especially are battling with diabetes, take that walk after your meal. Make sure you do that. Now, these are just different muscle groups that absorb the glucose. What else can you do? Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Always keep, one of the ways you're going to keep your cells in good functionality is by drinking lots of water. Remember, your cells, your body is majority water. So you're always getting in good, pure water. In addition to that, once again, get some good sunlight. Get good sunlight exposure. Face, neck, arms is what you need to have exposed when you're outside in that sunlight. Again, light skin, how long are you outside? 30 minutes. So again, 15 minutes, again, if you're think about this, killing a lot of birds with one stone. If you're exercising in a day, if you go and exercise outside 15 minutes going in one direction, 15 minutes coming back because you're doing 30 minutes of exercise, there's your sunlight right there. So you just got your sunlight plus you got your exercise in, all in one shot. So that's how easy it can be, okay? But the key is you got to do it. Blessed are the doers. When you look at the sunlight, in recent years, researchers have linked low vitamin D levels to insulin resistance and diabetes. Do you see that? That's why I was telling you, you got to get that vitamin D up. Okay? Allows for good bodily function. Overcoming insulin resistance in particular could be a way to head off type 2 diabetes before it sets in. Right now, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that giving people vitamin D might help with insulin resistance. So again, if you need to, take a supplement, take a supplement. But if not, then get some sunlight. Get that sunlight in, and you will find it's going to help in beautiful ways. Another thing you want to watch out in diabetes is neuropathy, nerve damage. So you want to do everything possible to keep a healthy nervous system. One of the ways that that will work is good blood flow. Hot and cold showers really boosts the circulatory system. It's going to take courage for some of us to do this, but you can do it, okay? It feels awesome. You might sing a little bit. The procedure is simple. Watch this. The procedure is simple and easy to remember. Just think this: 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 times, okay? 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 times. You could try this tonight when you get home. It says 3 minutes hot, followed by 30 seconds cold, repeated 3 times. If any of you struggle getting a good night's sleep, if you do that, you will find that it has almost a sedentary effect upon your body. It relaxes you. 3 minutes hot, 30 seconds cold, 3 times. You finish with cold, okay? You finish with cold, and you got to take it cold, okay? Don't do cool, don't cheat. Cold. Like I said, you'll hit the high note once, but after that, you'll be fine. So just do it. You will find that it works well. But it works wonders for your system. By simply alternating the faucets, you can boost your immune system, increase metabolism, and enliven healthy circulation of blood and lymph, and promote detoxification. Okay? These are all sorts of wonderful things that you can do when it comes to managing or battling or overcoming diabetes. A couple of last points. Please remember, cladding the limbs is very helpful. Some of us like to go to bed at night and the room might be very cold. If you're not under a cover, please remember, there's a statement in this wonderful little book, Ministry of Healing. It's a book that I recommend all of you to get a copy of and to read it through. It teaches a lot of wonderful lessons on how to have good health. And one of the things that the book teaches that I thought was awesome is it literally teaches about the importance of equally covering your limbs. And I've been doing this for years, and it affords for very good circulation. And perfect circulation does bring about perfect health. So I would like to recommend that you do your best to try to cover your limbs, especially if you're battling with neuropathy, because you need blood flow. Remember, life is in blood. You don't want, when you're going through neuropathy, you're not getting proper blood flow to the nervous system as it needs to. So one of the areas that helps to promote good blood flow is learning to cover your limbs better, especially when you got cold air circulating. It works wonders, okay? So that's something I want you to really think about. Yes?
Are you just talking when you're sleeping primarily?
No, this is like throughout the day.
Even at night?
Sure, throughout the day. Yep, throughout the day, during the evening, because the more your limbs are naked and then the cold air is pressing against it, if it gets too chilled, and one of our signs you get the goosebumps and all of that, your blood begins to retract backwards and it's going to go to the areas where it's warmest. And that's why if you touch the middle part of your body, you notice, wow, it's warm. You touch the other part of your body, wow, it's cold. Why do you think that is? It's because you have more blood here than you have here. So what you want to do is you want to dress in a way that promotes equal distribution of blood flow. And that way it affords to combat the complications and the challenges with neuropathy, which is nerve damage. All right? Finally, when you think about these ladies, just remember this goes for the bras. Guys, this goes for the bikini underwears. Watch out for anything, even a belt if you're not careful. If you pull your belt too tight, you want to make sure that you never do anything that inhibits blood flow. Don't dress in ways that inhibits blood flows. Ladies, it's all right to look beautiful, but don't go reshaping yourself. Because if you reshape yourself, you hurt yourself. My wife and I, we were out here and saw a little girl. She looked like she was only 13 years old, and she's walking with these high heel shoes, and she's like literally like this. And I was just looking at her like, wow. she's going to trip. She's going to fall down. And literally, it's like people will hurt themselves just to look pretty. And that just speaks to me of a whole different issue. That's self-esteem issues. But, it's all right to look nice, all right? I think it's important for us to look nice and all of that. That's fine. But don't hurt yourself to look nice, okay? And that's the problem is today when you got people, Cosmopolitan, Jennifer Lopez, Eva Longoria, Kim Kardashian, a lot of these women, they're reshaping and cutting and restructuring their bodies just so someone could say, oh, you look very pretty. How about exercise? That'll get the job done too. But be careful about doing things where it obstructs good blood flow. That's why I said, ladies, when you wear a bra, try not to wear it with these wires that literally, when you take it off, you have a red line right under you showing your circulation is getting cut off. Guys, undergarments. That's why boxers, I hope you don't mind me saying that, but boxers, that's best for men. It actually is because it doesn't obstruct. So that's the kind of things you want to keep in mind when you're getting dressed, especially if you're combating neuropathy. Finally, a major contributor to diabetes, huge, is stress. Stress is a beast of beasts, and it seems like a lot of people are being afflicted by it. And like I told you last night, you can't be peacefully stressed out. You just can't. It doesn't work well. It's one or the other. And so what they have found here in the American Diabetes Association, in people with diabetes, stress can alter blood glucose levels. People under stress may not take good care of themselves. They may drink more alcohol or exercise less. So that's one way. But then another way is this. Stress hormones actually alter blood glucose levels directly. So not only does stress cause us to neglect ourselves, but stress literally alters the cell's ability to absorb glucose. And this is, again, why I cannot stress enough the importance of praying, going to God and asking God, Lord, help me with my stress. Help me to remember you're in control of my life. I don't need to be in control because you're in control. You see, if any of you are fathers in this room, would you see danger coming to your son and do nothing about it? If you saw danger coming to your daughter, would you just do nothing about it? I don't think any loving parent would do that. Well, I don't think we can outlove God. And that means that when God sees things coming to us, even if he does allow it, it's because he saw some good that would come out of it. I'll share a quick little testimony with you and then we'll close. When I found out that I had to have heart surgery in 2016, I was mad because I really sought to live a very healthy life. And I did not understand, why do I have to go through this? And I remember that I cried out to God. I'm a minister. I'm a lifestyle educator, but I'm a minister. I travel all over the world encouraging people in Christ. And I got mad at God. I said, why would you let this happen to me? And so I began to complain and to fuss and complain. And I started to ask him, please take this away. Just do a miracle. Take it away. And he didn't. And I remember that it was the day of my surgery that I remember I'm on that gurney and they're getting ready to perform the surgery. And I said, stop, stop, stop. And they were all like, what's wrong? They all got their masks on. They're ready to go. And I'm telling them, stop, stop, stop. And I said, I need to pray before we start. And I prayed, and I remember I said, Lord, if I have to die through this, I accept it. Keep my wife, keep my children. And I just ask that you will continue to secure me in your love even as I get ready to go under. I said, however, but if this surgery is not appointed unto death but to life, I ask you to bless all these people in this room. Bless their families. I just started praying for everybody. And when it was done, I remember that the guy put the anesthesia in my arm. And I said, okay, is that it? And he said, yep, that's it. And I was like, okay. And you're gone. You're like down. That stuff knocks you out quick. Post-surgery, I learned so many lessons through that experience. I learned so many lessons of what it really means to surrender your life to God. I learned how to be content even in facing death. the possibility that I might not ever see my wife or children again as it pertains to this earth. And what God taught me was so powerful that when I started traveling again and preaching and teaching, people all over the world started sending me messages saying, Dwayne, there's something in your teaching and in your preaching now that we did not hear it as much before your surgery. And it's really meeting a lot of needs in our hearts and in our homes. I started to see that I became a better father, I became a better husband, I became a better man. And do you know that when people say, Dwayne, name the top 5 greatest things that ever happened in your life. Sure, I'll talk about surrendering my heart to God, meeting my wife, having my children, etc. But do you know one of the things I add to the list now? Open heart surgery. One of the best things that ever happened to me. Because I did not know how much more I needed to grow up as a man and to learn what it really means to trust God all the way till the end. And the lessons that I have received are so priceless that I can look back at that surgery and I could say, even when he allowed that thing to happen, it was for my good, even though I couldn't see it. You have a Father in heaven that cares about you. And you know what's so deep? Even if you don't acknowledge him, he still cares about you. And he still protects. And he still watches over. And that's why your heart is still beating. And so, truly, I mean it when I say we need to stop stressing. We have someone who cares about us, who says, I can see what you can't see, but I only allow things to happen in your life that works out for your best interest. And for that reason, you can rest. You can rest and let go of the stress. And so I just want to give that to you tonight. And I hope that that helps you, all right? Diabetes can be overcome, but it's taking on the whole lifestyle program. And if you're willing to take on the whole lifestyle program, give it a try for a couple of weeks. Like I told you, as fast as, for some people, as fast as a month, they've seen a change. If that's something you're willing to even give a shot, give it a try, I'm going to ask you to please stand to your feet with me. Give it a shot, give it a try. And I think you'll experience some powerful, powerful things, powerful blessings. And that's what he has in store for all of you. Why don't we go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Our loving Father, we thank you so much for what you shared with us. Thank you for reminding us and letting us know that diabetes can be overcome. I just pray that as we seek to cooperate with these principles, Lord, please bless us beyond our expectations and truly draw our hearts close to you, that we can also allow you to take away that stress and you can give us your peace in return. I pray this for everyone under the sound of my voice. In Jesus' name, amen. Tomorrow night, we are going to go against that thing called cancer. So if you know anybody that's battling with all sorts of cancers, please come on by tonight. We're going to talk about it. We're going to go over it. And I trust that there's going to be some powerful blessings in store for us. If any of you would like to inquire about any of the books or materials, there's going to be some books in the back on diabetes with more information than what was shared. Take a look at that, and hopefully you'll be blessed. Look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow night. Take care and God bless.